Well, hey there, and welcome to the Legacy Church podcast. We are starting a new segment where we're just going to be interviewing people, getting you more information about what it looks like to experience what God can do through you. This morning, I have a good friend and a mentor of mine and someone that I'm excited to talk to. His name's Jeff Juhala. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. Hey, would you just introduce yourself? Tell them what you're about, what you're doing.
Yeah, Jeff, and we're currently working for a group called Royal Family Kids. We're a ministry that works with foster children, taking them to summer camps and mentoring programs. This summer we'll have, our normal summer we'd have about 9,000 foster kids in camp, and we have about 240 churches around the country that operate those local camps. So that's what we do on a professional level. On a personal level, I've got a family of 6, and my wonderful wife Janet and 4 kids. I like to do things in the mountains. It's awesome. Very different in the mountains. I love kayaking, hiking, target shooting, and building things in the garage.
Very cool. Cool. What is your role at Royal Family Kids?
Currently, it's the director of training, and I'm over the ministries of camp and mentoring clubs. So we train all the new, we're basically like a franchise operation as the national office. We'll train a church in how to operate one of our camps and mentoring clubs, and then they go out and do it. So it's all about training and providing the resources for them to go out and do that job.
Awesome. And how did you get involved in that? How did you choose that as your life's work?
So my wife and I were at our church in Northern California where your dad came to work with us, and they exposed us to this thing called Royal Family Kids.
Yeah.
I was working with a contractor at electrical construction as the safety director there. So I did safety manuals and safety training. And then Wayne Tesh, the founder, came and spoke and said, start a camp. And my wife and I had really felt a burden for doing something with orphans. Yeah. This seemed to be a good fit. So we did that for 6 years as camp directors, just as volunteers.
Sure.
We had our jobs, we had our family, we were doing our thing. And then God began stirring in our hearts about 4 years into it, and we knew that we were going to move and we were going to get into full-time ministry. We didn't know what that meant, but we knew those two things. That's a long story how that we knew that, but we knew those two pieces. And then Wayne offered us a position to move down here and take the role as the training director. And so I went from safety training and safety manuals to camp training and camp manuals. Nothing else was much the same, but those two were the same. So,
well, it's nice that you had some overlap there at least. So then recently you got a degree from Azusa Pacific in leadership, is that right?
Correct.
So walk me through how did that happen?
So after I got my bachelor's degree, I knew I wanted to pursue a master's degree, but it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. When do you do that? When's the right time? And what would be the payoff?
Sure.
I was in a construction office at the time, and construction doesn't typically put a high value on the academic world, right? They just want to say, get it built.
Right.
So there was no great incentive there. But I kept looking and searching, and it was one of those things in the back of my mind. When Wayne approached us and said, move to Southern California and take this new role, he said, you'll also need to get a minister's license because we work so often with churches, raise money and recruit, but also get a master's degree in any subject you want because we also want to have a high level of academic knowledge when we work with the state.
Yeah.
So I looked at MBAs again, but by that time I had really studied leadership a bit more, reading my own books, going to seminars through work, that type of thing. And leadership just became such an interesting subject to me that I thought I will pursue that, and found a great program at APU and went through that 3 years of night school and got a Master's of Arts in Organizational Leadership.
Wow. Okay, so I don't have a master's degree in leadership. I have a bachelor's degree in leadership studies. But what is one thing that you wish you would have known 20 years ago that you learned through your master's program that you, if you were to go back 20 years and tell yourself, hey, this is going to be crucial, what's that one thing?
I'll give you the one that's quasi-leadership, but applies to everything, and that is the power of the network. I finally learned the value of the network too late. Not too late. Nothing's ever too late. I learned it later than I wish I had, right? Yeah. If you say, what do you wish you knew 20 years ago? I wish when I started at this electrical contractor, I knew the power of networking with people right then. I ended up having a decent network because my job required me to be places and meet people.
Sure.
But I didn't approach it with intentionality. I could have grown my network so much more if I'd just been intentional.
Yeah.
Wayne, in fact, sent me this book called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And it's all about building your network. And it's a great title because build your network before you need your network. And there's another one titled Never Eat Lunch Alone. And that's what I should have been
that.
doing. So many times I ate lunch by myself, and I thought I could have been building a network. But that's one of them, and I'll tell you just one quick networking story. The one time networking really paid off for me was I was given an opportunity to go do some electrical training for another contractor I didn't need to do. There was no particular reason to do it for the company. It didn't benefit anybody, but it was just expanding, working for another person that wanted some help. So I did that, and there was a project on the Golden Gate Bridge. And they said, I thought, well, this is an opportunity to see part of the Golden Gate Bridge that you don't normally get to see because they were doing work underneath. Oh, cool. So I did this for this other contractor just because it's what you do. And this person said to me afterwards, hey, would you ever be interested in going to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge? And I said, oh, man. Yeah, I would. And so she arranged it because she was working there as their safety person, that few people get this opportunity, but she had made some contacts within her network, and she didn't want to go to the top, so she gave me a chance, and we went to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, 745 feet off the water. Amazing trip that had nothing to do with my job, really. Yeah. But within the network, it was just a personal thing. It was a great thing that I would have never had I not offered to go out and just help a friend who needed some help.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how have you used your knowledge of leadership in your role at Royal Family or in other places in life?
I think two of the things that came out of the specific study of leadership for me was that there are so many different ways to define leadership is one of the things. Yeah, so one of the books we studied had accumulated 600 different definitions of leadership. Wow. Because it can mean so many things to so many people. It's very subjective, which attracted me to it because it wasn't scientific, and yet you can get lost in the maze of how many different ways it can be applied. Right. For instance, a CEO will think of leadership as vision and influence, whereas a middle manager might think of leadership as I've got a certain number of people that report to me, but I've also got to report to somebody above, and somebody farther down may say, I'm not a leader at all, I'm just the guy that puts the bolts on the car, and yet they have to lead themselves, they have to lead their peers, and sometimes they have to lead back up the chain of command because they know certain things that other people don't know. Yeah. So there's different ways to look at leadership, and that was part of the exciting part. But then to apply that, one of the things I did discover was sure is easy to study leadership compared to applying leadership. Right? Some leadership positions, when I was a camp director, it was 90% joy and fun and excitement. But boy, that other 10% was hard. That other 10% was just really tough. It was making hard decisions. It was conflict. It was getting in the midst of people's messes. My job now is probably 60-40. 60% a lot of fun in leading, but the other 40% is the difficult stuff, the challenging stuff, the conflict management, the budgets, the stuff that you don't always sign up for, but it comes with part of the job, and it's just part of leading. And so you just have to take that and understand where are your strengths, where are they not, and how do you manage both.
So I'm curious, what do you think your personal definition of leadership is?
So we studied a lot. John Maxwell would say leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, which is a great, simple, short definition of leadership that applies most of the time. I was troubled by that when I had to do my final paper to put that in there, because it would allow for someone like Hitler to be called a good leader because he influenced. Stalin influenced. So I was troubled by that, and for an academic paper, I thought I need to come up with my own words. Sure. I do love the words of Jesus when he simply said, "Follow me." Right? 2 words. And that itself is a great definition of leadership. It means I'm out front, you can just get behind and follow me and where I go and what I do. For my paper, I had to come up with my own, so based on all of our studies, I came up with this definition. Leadership is a vision influencing others for responsible results. And it's just certain key words that I thought had to be in there. A vision, because you've got to have a vision out there. Sure. Influence is still in there. Others, meaning whether they're employees or church members or neighbors or a little league team. So you're influencing somebody, but for what? For some sort of responsible results. So as a Christian, I thought I had to have that word responsible in there because, you could influence people in a greedy manner to, do inappropriate things. So for me, I had to have that word in there, responsible, but always getting some kind of results. There's got to be some results at the end of the day.
Oh, that's really good. How long did it take you to come up with that?
Well, the master's program was 3 years, but my final class was only 8 weeks. So we worked on that, on various things over those 8 weeks, but that was part of it. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And how has that definition helped inform the way you do ministry or the way you work for Royal Family or with your family and kids?
Well, it's not like I sit down and think about it. It came out of how I've already operated.
That's good.
So it's not like I have it on my wall and I have to go remember it. It was, I came up with it because it's how I already operate.
Yep.
That we need to give vision to our people, whether it's family, like I said, church, business. We need to influence them. That can mean so many different things, whether it's, giving an assignment or just having a conversation, with your child, like, hey, what are you working on? What are you doing? How can I help you? So all those things just came out of how I'm already operating my life.
Yeah.
And it's just what I want to continue to do, but it does remind me of how are we getting those responsible results? In a church ministry, we're really focused on that anyway, but if you were in a business, that might be more of a challenge. Is my business, is my boss, is somebody I'm working with asking me to do something that's less than responsible?
Yeah.
So there may be more challenge there for other people.
So there's an ethical component there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. One of the things that I've noticed a lot about you, and we have a lot of the same friends, and so every time I'm with people that I would consider mentors and leaders in my life, one thing I know about them is they're constantly listening to something or they're constantly reading something. So what's something that you find yourself reading or listening to right now that we would find helpful?
So I routinely read my Bible. Right now I'm in the Old Testament, just about to break into the New Testament. This particular time, though, in reading through it, instead of highlighting things or underlining things, which has been a tradition for me, I decided this time as I read through, I'm going to keep a separate notepad. And when I find a specific verse that looks, different to me, I'm writing it down in a separate notebook because the act of writing influences the brain differently. So the Bible's always there. I'm a huge fan of the history of World War II. So I'm almost always got a World War II book going about the heroes, the sacrifice, the challenges, the overcoming, how everything meant something. More specifically to leadership, I've been trying to be on somebody's blog newsletter. Like I'll find a different one on the internet and get their newsletter for a year, and then I'll drop it and pick up somebody else, just so I hear from different voices.
Sure.
I would say the Global Leadership Summit is a great one. If you don't already know about that, I've been going to that for the last 3 or 4 years, Global Leadership Summit out of Willow Creek Church. But I would also say I have discovered that biographies teach a lot about leadership, but also about life.
Yeah.
So I've been blogging myself recently, and one of the articles I put in there is about biographies, how they teach us things. And when you study a leader, you make certain assumptions about who they are. Were they a strong leader like Patton, you make certain assumptions. Were they a more quiet leader like George Marshall, who was part of World War II as well? He was a more quiet leader, but all of them had influences in their lives that kind of created them to be the way they were. When you read their biographies or watch things about them, you always learn more than you thought.
Right.
You made an assumption,
Right.
and then this biography is now sort of correcting that assumption.
Yep.
They always had high highs and low lows. They always worked harder than you thought they worked. They always got lucky somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Most biographies will reveal certain things, and for me, that's been a great way to study leadership is through personal biographies because it's what I call the reality of life.
Yeah.
Theory is great, but their life was a reality, and you can learn from that.
Yeah. And so what are some other study materials in addition to the biographies that you would recommend? Obviously not everybody who watches this or listens to this is going to be a CEO.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that that's an excuse not to study
right.
how to lead.
That's right. Well, we studied not only leadership, but we had a great book on followership. And it was the first time I'd heard that phrase. I thought, followership, where's that been all my life, right? So everybody, wherever you're at, and this is part of what we studied too, is no matter who you are, you can be a better leader if you study the subject matter. And if somebody says, I'm just a stay-at-home person and I'm just watching my kids, or I'm just the janitor, anybody who puts the word just in front of their name or title, they can study leadership and get better because leadership always starts with leading yourself. And if you lead yourself well, then you can start to lead others well. And influence doesn't have to be up and down a chain of command. Influence can be anywhere. It can be with your neighbors, with your fellow congregants, with your parents, leading up, leading down to your children. So influence applies everywhere we go. Right now in our society with all the turmoil, there needs to be great positive influence.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a chain of command telling them what to do with some of the challenges we have right now.
Yeah.
We want positive influence from friends, family, neighbors.
Sure.
So everybody can study it from that standpoint. But even the study of followership simply says we need good followers. And followers have certain expectations. And if you understand what those expectations are, sometimes you need to push up the chain of command and say, I'm a good follower, I'm a good worker. I don't want to be in charge, but I still want good communication.
Yeah.
I still want to know what the expectations are.
Right.
I still want to know that I'm valued.
Right.
So even from that standpoint, a good follower can push back up the chain of command or influence to say, I need stuff from this organization, or from you, my boss, or from you, my friend. And so even the study of followership says we've all got to speak up. And that's another one of the things I think I learned in the study was when I'm in charge, I need to speak less. But when I'm not in charge, I need to speak more. And I think I sort of had the opposite of that because I need to influence that.
There's feedback.
Yeah.
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 So you have, your oldest daughter is not much younger than me. So what is one way that you have like helped shaped her and grow your kids as leaders?
Yeah, growing them as leaders. Partly it's taking responsibility. Partly it's understanding their personalities, right? Everybody's got a different personality. And you talk about studying leadership material. When you do that, you also need to know your particular personality style, whether it's Myers-Briggs test or Enneagram test, understanding your strengths and your weaknesses. So that's one thing we've really tried to work with our kids is understanding your personality. And you've got something to offer, but you've also got a blind spot. And that's probably where I've spent more time on personality indicators, strength finders, because I've got 4 different kids and they are 4 different personalities.
Yeah.
And my oldest one, she is a go-getter. She's a take-it-on. She does not need motivation. She's already very self-motivated.
Yeah.
But then sometimes she can be self-critical. So I can work with that. Whereas others may need more motivation, right? So I look at each of them and say, well, what does your personality already have as a strength? And what do I as a parent need to help with? Because as parents, it's this balance of control versus influence.
Right.
The younger they are, it's more control. But every year they get older, we lose control, but we gain the power of having an influence in their life. Wow. So I'm really working now. I've got 3 in the 20s range about how do my wife and I influence them in a positive way, whether it's leadership wise or spiritual wise or anything else, is understanding their personalities and then helping motivate where they're already strong, but also help them where they've got some blind spots.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to throw a cold cock question at you. This weekend is Father's Day.
Yeah.
What do you see the role of leadership playing in fatherhood as a whole, as it pertains to leading your kids or leading your spouse?
Well, fathers have been beaten up the last 20 years in media and in society, and some of it rightly so, because there's been a lot of fathership failures.
Sure.
A lot of kids raised without fathers. A lot of that going on. We deal with that in our kids camp programs with foster children who have no dads and they don't know who their dads are. So fathers have been beaten up, sometimes rightly so. So it comes back to fathers need to know what their responsibilities are and fulfill those responsibilities, right? So what are their responsibilities? It's taking care of themselves so that they can provide for their spouse and their kids, right? One of the great definitions of manhood I heard years ago was, what does it mean to be a man? A man is somebody who acknowledges and fulfills their responsibilities.
Wow.
And fatherhood is the essence of manhood. Once you have a child, you have to recognize and fulfill your responsibilities. Yeah. And there should be great joy in that.
Absolutely.
There should be great joy, and it shouldn't be this, laborious, whiny, what the media sort of portrays, cranky guys who are dumb, and the media can sometimes portray fathers as dumb and inept. And that's wrong, right? That's a stereotype that gets laughs on a comedy show, but it throws a wet blanket, it throws a gray cloud over real fatherhood. And fatherhood should be fun. You should have bad, corny dad jokes. All those things should be there, right? But there should be this love and this commitment, and really it just comes down to acceptance of responsibility.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. So good. Thank you so much for chatting with us. If people wanted to get in contact with you or want to learn more from you, where can they go to find you on that?
Well, at work, it's rfk.org. My email there, if you want to get information about that, would be jeffj at, spell it all out, royalfamilykids.org.
Awesome. And you said you had a blog.
Yeah.
Where can they
so
find that?
If you're interested, and the blog just came out of personal writings and wanting to influence. My mother wrote a lot on paper, and she passed away, but her papers still have a chance to influence, and I wanted to do something similar. So I thought, I don't need to put it on a paper. Let's put it on a blog page where I can get even some video. So all that to say, 67thstreet.us, 67th street.us is my blog page.
Very cool.
Very unusual. I was not trying to make it easy. I was not trying to make it where everybody will run to. It's just very personal to me for my personal writings, but also a place to put some influence.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Well, man, we are so excited about bringing you new content all the time, figuring out ways that you can experience the ways that God is working through you. Thanks for joining us today.